Well, first of all, my name is Ken Cope, and I'm running to become the next United States Senator for the state of Texas. I'm 60 years old. I've been married to my bride for 39 years. Her name is Marie. She's a home health physical therapist. We have 3 grown children, 5 grandchildren, 4 grandsons, and 1 grand princess, as I like to say. Very special, these children. And the reason I'm running is because I'm scared to death that we're losing our country. And it's a situation, if we don't stand up and fight for our country today, there won't be a country for our children to be fighting for tomorrow. And someone has to do something. Someone has to stand up and recognize that the failed leadership in the incumbent needs to be replaced. And we don't have time to sit around and dawdle and wait. And we need people with genuine purpose and passion that'll stand up and fight, as opposed to just keeping a seat warm in the United States Senate.
You're a veteran, and
yes, I am.
after the 2014 elections, there will only be about 12 veterans left in the Senate, which is a historic low. How will you use your military experience to differentiate yourself?
Well, that experience is very broad. You know, I went in the military at the age of 18 as a private, and 27 years later I retired as a lieutenant colonel, and I'm very, very proud of that. The experience that I gained is going to help me significantly, both from understanding what it is to be a team player and all the way through the leadership roles that, and the things that we've learned in the military and how to do it. Good example is that the military teaches you that if you're going to get into a fight or into a debate or into a conflict, that you best pick the time and the location. And when you have the upper ground, you need to exploit it. Those are principles that are not being displayed by our current incumbent senator. Does not understand the art of negotiation and the tactics of what it takes to be a winner in conflicts. And we've seen failed leadership roles on different things that he's been involved in, from Obamacare through immigration reform, through just many different things. So how am I going to use it? I'm going to use the leadership principles that I've been taught and perfected, that I've used in the military and also in the commercial side. I spent 28 years in private industry. I started out as a cost control specialist with a global aerospace manufacturing company, and ended up retiring as a business development executive with a reputation for solving the most complex of problems successfully. And so, you know, I've been able to take my leadership experience from the military, bring it into private practice, and I'm looking forward to being able to use my experience in negotiating, you know, billions of dollars of contracts internationally, and use that in the United States Senate.
Texas is, or our junior senator, is often blamed for the government shutdown or slim down, whatever you want to call it, in the fall. Do you feel that that event was good for this country?
I do feel it was good for the country. I happen to be a very strong supporter that that was the right tactic. And as you just heard in my lead-in, that if you're not ready to fight for this country today, there won't be a country for us to be fighting for our children in the future. And I believe that that's one of the tools in the toolbox. And you've got to bring the Democratic Party into a position of negotiation. If I stick my hand out to shake hands with you, and you don't stick your hand out to shake hands back, we're not going to ever have an opportunity to have a relationship. That's what's been happening in Congress. And you have to bring them to the party. And I believe that Senator Cruz's technique and tactic was absolutely correct. And Senator Cornyn turns around and says that he disagrees with that tactic. He didn't want to shut down the government. And that's why he voted for the closure on Obamacare, on the funding. Yet 30 days later, he turns right around and votes for closure, for shutting down the government in support of the debt increase battle that was going on. That's hypocrisy. That's not leadership. But I do agree with Ted Cruz, and I would consider it an honor to be elbow to elbow or back to back with him on the floor of the United States Senate. And you know, it would be extremely honoring to be Texas representative in changing his title from junior senator of Texas to the senior senator of Texas.
On the issue of shaking hands with fellow senators, do you feel the Republican leaders of the Senate are making the right moves?
Oh, no, I do not. I believe that we have a broken Republican Party in Congress, and that's why I'm running. I mean, I've never run in politics before. This is my first soiree into politics, and it's because I'm frustrated just like all of you. I've been paying my taxes, obeying the law, I've been raising a family, and I have had a career. And I watch what's happening, and I see what's happening in the Republican Party, particularly to what your question is, and I know that we've got to have a change. It's not the Republican Party I've lived with. I've been a Republican for 42 years. I've never left the party, but I certainly feel like so many Texans that it has left me. And the leadership of Senator McConnell and Senator Cornyn are the reasons for a lot of that change. It's gotten so cozy to what we call the establishment and to the big money, as represented by the $10 million that Senator Cornyn has raised in the last 6 years, that it's as though they've forgotten who they work for. And they've forgotten that it's the citizens of their respective states that are expecting them to stand up and lead. And lead means sometimes you have to stick your nose out there. And they're afraid to do that. And they capitulate before they ever get into a negotiation or a discussion with the opponent. And it's over and over again. It's a repetitive process. And they've established a pattern that the other party knows exactly what the pattern is. You can anticipate the punch, and that is that they're going to duck. And they have ducked over and over again.
If Republicans regain the Senate,
we will regain the Senate in November.
But let's say there's still enough establishment senators that want to keep Mitch McConnell as a new majority leader. How would you work with them if the quote-unquote establishment stays
well,
the same?
I think the first thing I'd like to say to that is, as a junior senator going into the Senate, and we do, whether we have the majority or not, we have to elect a leadership, okay? Mitch McConnell will not be my first choice in any type of leadership role. If he is elected as leader, then I will do my absolute best to stick my hand out to see if there's anyone else going to stick their hand back, because that's what the public needs, that's what our citizens need, and that's what they would expect of me to do. And I can work with a lot of people. I mean, I haven't been successful in international business because of just shutting people off, because we haven't been able to come to terms. You've got to understand what the parameters are that we're dealing with here. What is the most important thing to this? It isn't Ken Cope. It isn't sitting in the Senate. It's the citizens of this country that are the ones that are hurting and in pain because of the broken policies of this government. If we're so blessed to have the majority, we need to use it and use it wisely. But we need leaders that just aren't career politicians that are looking for a retirement pillow, that are really making the right decisions for the people and not just for the establishment or for the large donors to their particular campaigns.
Well, let's talk about immigration. That's in the news today. As the House leadership just came out with a new, quote, standards for immigration reform, end quote. They say that, quote, our nation's immigration system is broken and our laws are not being enforced, end quote. Can it be both, or is one just the result of the other?
I would have to agree it is broken. Immigration today is no longer just a social program and a social issue. It's a national defense issue. And because of that, if you look at copetexas.com, my website, you can see that I've already come out with a 4-point plan. I've read through the 1,176 page that's sitting on President Obama's desk that I'm told because Senator John McCain likes it, I should like it. Well, I'm going to tell you it's an absolute dog. And we should never try to enforce that inside this country. And I don't know how it got past the Senate to where it is. The parameters of it, from invading, or not invading, but crossing over and destroying states' rights, as well as the Fourth Amendment rights of the citizens and the financial boondoggle that goes on, doesn't work. My plan is very simple. One, we need to secure a fence from 1,974 miles from ocean to ocean along the southern border. And it can be done in 1 year by the Army Corps of Engineers, because it is a national defense issue. And we have precedents in the past that shows that it can be done. And it's about a $3 billion cost. Current bill has a 700-mile fence, takes 5 years to build, and it's $8 billion. And it's not a workable solution. So number one is we build a fence. Number two is, and it's kind of, let's call it 1A, okay? And that is that we have over 250,000 illegal immigrants incarcerated in our prisons today that we are paying for. You and me and all the citizens out here in this system are paying to try to rehabilitate and house. As soon as that fence is up, they get to go home to one of their over 170 countries Okay? And either the country takes them back, or we put them on a canoe with no oars and they land on the seashore the next day. It is not our responsibility to care and feed those particular individuals. The second point is that English is the language of this country, and all immigrants should have to express the ability to read, write, and understand English, with the exception of the very young and very old. Number three is if they participate in the armed forces or in a first responders type position, that participant, their spouse, and their immediate children after 2 years of good service are American citizens. The last group is all the rest of the immigrants. They would have 6 months to come out of the shadows, and as they join at the end of the line for immigration, they receive a provisional Social Security card. It allows two things. First, they start paying taxes, just like all other Americans. Second, they can draw their benefits, but they cannot vote until they go through the complete process. I believe that part of the problem is that the Republican Party has been labeled as a non-caring, a heartless party of the rich, and that is absolutely false. It's a party of the working people, and it has compassion, and where we've allowed it to brand us because of this argument that we're going to deport everybody is absolutely a foolish argument. And the argument that they're taking jobs from us, they're taking jobs that other Americans did not want. They've already taken the jobs. They're not going to be losing any more jobs for this immigration. And it restores within the 38% of the Texas population that are Hispanic, 99.5%, which are already American citizens, by the way. It takes the stigma away of the illegal aspects. 12 years have gone by that this problem has become from a social issue to a national defense issue. It is so easy to pack materials across the border, and there are millions of people coming across the border. Let there be no joke and no doubt, this is an invasion, which under the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, allows this state to use its armed forces, being the National Guard, to defend itself. That is allowable within the Constitution. People don't want to look at it that way, but that is a fact.
On the issue of the budget, what are the biggest cuts in federal government that need to be made? If you had to prioritize the top three, one or two or three areas of government that absolutely have to be cut, not in terms of increase, but in actual terms of an actual cut, what do you think those areas should be?
Well, I'm going to rephrase your question just a little bit, and that you're really kind of focusing on the national debt. We have a national debt problem, then we have a budget problem. The budget problem stems that we're spending about $3.7 trillion a year and we're only bringing in about 2.4, okay? So we have a gap, and we've got to cross that either by raising taxes or by cutting costs, which gets back to the basic of your question. But we also have to deal with the national debt, which is the accumulation of all of our wrongdoings over particularly the last 5 years, okay? That's put us at 17 trillion in the hole. The first thing I would do to address both of those is I'd take this plan that Senator Tom Coburn has come out every year with, the Book of Waste, and we ought to be lopping those things off right off the top. From a departmental standpoint, I believe that the Department of Education would make a better parking lot and returning all of that money back to the state, and the states should be responsible for their education along with the counties, and the parents ought to be responsible for education. That is not something the federal government ought to be in. Secondly, I believe that the Homeland Security has become extremely fluff as a pillow, if you will. And I believe that there's opportunities to be taking down that particular cost. The other area happens to do with benefits. We've got to come to grips with what's happening in all of the entitlement programs. It's not one specific department, but we also have to make sure that it's fair and equitable and it's sustainable. When we have benefit programs that are resulting in people making much more money than they would in the job market, something's wrong. I think we have to have an adjustment and an equalizer to ensure that people are motivated to go out and find work. Now, that's the big problem, is where's the jobs? And that's where I have experience. I recently just brought in and was responsible for putting together the business plan that achieved a $2 billion contract manufacturing airplane fuselages, almost 2,000 of them, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for a little company called Embraer out of Brazil. We are at a very key point in the history of this country. We've gone through the outsourcing, and we've seen what happens in the third world manufacturing prices. They continue to escalate. Chinese have a much better understanding of negotiation tactics and techniques than what we do in this country. Theirs are very long term. They knew if they bought in that we'd eliminate the ability to manufacture and capital in this country, and they start jacking the prices up. What I just demonstrated to you with Embraer out of Brazil is that we have an opportunity to start bringing those jobs back, to recapitalize and insource. But we've also have to have a financial structure within this country that receives it. I have come out with a 503 IRS elimination plan. It's out on my website, copetexas.com. You can understand it. It's very simple. It eliminates all personal and business filing of income tax, but it still generates the revenue we need to run this country. And that's what our business needs, is needs the shackles of the federal government taken off of them so that the business people can make the decisions and create jobs. Obamacare is a job killer. There's two things in this election that concern people the most. Obamacare, not just the health care piece, but what it's doing to the economy. People that are graybeards like me at 60, okay, they're not retiring today. Why? Because they can't afford any health care insurance. So people at our point in life, when they would retire, you could normally replace with 2 to 3 people. Young people in job market. So we've stopped people rotating out of the market and blocked from new people coming in, and now we've got over 30 million that aren't even in the job roles because we're not accounting for them. We got to be honest and straight talking, okay? The employment situation is broken in this country. The administration does not want to accept it because of politics. We're beyond politics. The reality is the citizens of this state and this country are in deep trouble. And if we don't stand up and have people who are going to go fight for this today, there will not be this country for our children tomorrow.
If you could unilaterally add one amendment or even take one amendment away from the Constitution, what would you choose?
Oh, this is a wonderful question. First of all, I do support a constitutional convention. I support changes that should be made to the Constitution, just not one. But since you've asked for one specific, the first one I would think that we need to put in the Constitution is that there will be no law passed by Congress that exempts the Congress or the President of the United States from falling under and having to comply with. Okay? In other words, they have to live with the same trouble that they create and they put on the American people. Other things that are extremely important, I believe that there isn't term limits in the Constitution, and I'm going to speak to the Senate issue specifically. I believe when we, in about 1913 time frame, when they put in the 17th Amendment, which allows me to run for public office, from the public in determining if I get to be a senator or not, as opposed to the state legislature, it created an environment that brought the big money and it allowed people outside of Texas to have more influence than the people inside of Texas as to who they're going to vote to become their next United States Senator. I think that's wrong. I believe the 17th Amendment should be repealed. That ties directly along with the term limits. I am a term limit supporter. I've signed a contract with Texas. You can see it out on my website. Term limits is right up front. And it says that no senator should serve more than 2 terms in the Senate, period. And I'm talking about in aggregate. So if they've split it up, it's 2 terms. I believe that's what the framers of the Constitution intended, but I really believe the states ought to be the ones that would be determining that. So in that contract, term limits, there's also campaign finance restrictions. I have taken a personal pledge and signed my name to it because there's only one thing I take with me when I leave this world and I stand in front of that judgment seat. It's not cowboy boots and it's not blue jeans, it's my integrity. And if I've given someone my word, I was taught as a young man that your word is your bond. And you better say what you mean and mean what you say. Those are the personal parameters I live with. There isn't anything worse or scarier to me than to think that my grandchildren and my family would not be proud of what their grandfather is doing today. I'm not going to let that happen. And because of that, when we start looking at the debt finance, I've made a commitment that for 4.5 years of that first 6-year term, the doors will be closed to PAC money coming in and filling the coffers to try to build a campaign war chest. I am confident that when Texans see my performance at the end of that 4.5 years going into the next election time frame, that they'll be very proud and anxious to have me go for a second term. If that's not what they want, then it's time for them to send my butt home. Put it very bluntly. They have the right to hire and fire me. That's who I work for. That's what our current senator has forgotten. He works for the citizens of Texas. He's been a career politician his entire life. He and I went to college together. We didn't know each other, but we both went to St. Mary's University. He was in the law school and I was in the undergraduate program. He went down a path which says that he's a career politician, going from one career campaign to the next, always having to build coffer and get donations. I went out into business. I had an undergraduate in accounting. I went out into business. I ended up with a master's in corporate finance. And I tell everyone I have a PhD in practical experience and common sense. And that isn't something you're going to find in Washington, D.C. And that is the problem, is that they have become so immune and sheltered from what the real Texans and people are going through, that they've lost touch. And it's that loss of touch which is going to create a significant change in this campaign for the next United States Senator in the state of Texas.
Thank you for joining us. How can people find out more about your campaign?
Well, first of all, Hal, I'd like to thank you for having me here. Any opportunity we have to get our word out in front of the citizens of Texas is extremely helpful. This election time frame is really critical, as you've already heard me say. You can find out the information about me at copetexas.com. You can follow me on Cope Texas on both Facebook and Twitter as well. I respond to emails. I respond to questions on Facebook. I'm out driving across Texas, as we were talking. It used to be that you did it with a horse and a set of saddlebags and shaking hands with Texans. Today we do it with a Toyota. But it still is just as important to get out and reach people and meet people. So we're doing candidate forums for Republican organizations and for the Tea Party, of which I'm active with. You're welcome to have all your listeners and observers come and participate. I encourage them to participate. Be part of this solution. If they don't get involved in it, let's face it, I only get to vote once. I'm voting for me. There's no doubt about it, because I am the only solution-based candidate in this race. My solutions are out there. It's just not one solution on immigration or on 503 IRS replacement plan. There are multiple issues out there that I put my name on and say I'm willing to go stand up and represent Texas. So people are welcome to come out and participate in these events. I only have one vote. If they don't stand up and vote in the primary, which is March the 4th, okay? That is, this whole election is March the 4th. That's where they need to be. There are multiple forums for them to come learn about the candidates. And I encourage them to study all the candidates and choose very carefully, because your future and your children's future are at stake in this campaign. So thank you very much, and God bless all the observers, and God bless Texas and the United States of America.
Thank you.
Thank you.